Hello and welcome back to the Looking Glass world. My name is Aradhana Mathews and today we are ranking I don't know if you can see my gothic collection. Of course, I have much more because I love gothic literature and I'm using gothic in the loose sense. All of these books here kind of have elements of the supernatural, and so I've kind of all put them into one category, but we're ranking some of them today. So if you're ready, let's go. I have pulled up this nifty little thing that all the YouTubers are using to rank things, and I found it, and we're going to use it today to rank my collection of gothic / horror / supernatural books, which I love very much. So let's start with this one, which I mentioned, I think in a previous video, a recent video. It's called The Aunt Who Wouldn't Die. So this one I like for multiple reasons. One being it's something that everybody can read, and that's one of the things I want to do, which is get more people reading. It's short, it's quick, and it's got all the classic tropes of a gothic story, but set in a Bengali aristocratic family. So you have here a female protagonist who's going into this old crumbling home through marriage. She marries into that family. And of course, things are a little bit weird, things are a little bit dysfunctional, and she's finding out that it's, all of these, there's more to the story than meets the eye when one of the aunts dies. Now, while everyone else is mourning the death of this aunt, this new bride somehow can't stop seeing and hearing her. So through the course of the story, you kind of get into these things like gender dynamics, class, and I talked about this in my earlier video, so I'm speeding through it, but I like that it's super short, but also something that's very socially relevant as well. So where do we place this is the question. So I'm gonna put this at like a level 2 or a level 3. Maybe for now, if I'm being conservative, I'll just put it at a level 3. Next up, we have The Sundown Motel. Now this I read quite a while ago and I finished it like in a day because it's like a really fun, spooky thriller kind of novel. Is it deep? Not at all. But it's about, it's set in two timelines, I think, 1982 and 2017. And the stories are kind of interconnected. So somebody in 2017, that timeline, she goes to find out what happened to a relative of hers who went missing in the past. So that's kind of where the story kicks in. And when she, like her journey takes her to this motel where things are not right. And because this is my horror collection, this is going to be spooky, and you're right, there are ghosts and it gets creepy, and but it's a lot of fun. And I think I would actually put this maybe at a level 2. So let's do that in this thing, simply because it is great for people who are looking for just pure like fun horror reads, and that is exactly what this is. So it's very on theme and there's nothing to deconstruct in this book per se. Next up, we have The Once and Future Witches. It's very dusty, excuse me. I really liked this one because it has all the fun of, witch hunts. Well, it's not fun, but like thrill and the darkness and all of that, of slightly supernatural elements between 3 sisters who have magical blood in them. But overall is really a commentary about this idea of like the witch hunts itself and why they were so problematic. And there's elements of like gender and how each sister reclaims that in a very different way. And there are very different challenges that come with the choices that they make. For now, I'm going to do Once and Future Witches in level 3 as well, because it's similar in the sense that it has that social commentary there, but Aunt Who Wouldn't Die is definitely more nuanced. For now, we're keeping it there. Bringing us to Gallant. Now, I've heard different opinions about this. Some people are like, it's very, stagnant. It's not as fast-paced as it should be, considering the premise of the book, which is the fact that there is a house that has it's one of those very typical gothic houses. There's a fence in front of it, and the thing is, the fence separates much more than just the house from the land outside the house. It is a different world altogether. It goes into themes of like death and the line between the dead and the living, but again, I wouldn't say it's very deep. This is more doing it for fun, and you have like a girl who is the protagonist, who again in classic gothic style, but she's always been alone and singled out because something was off about her and nobody could really understand. It's just a weird vibe they got from her, so she tended to spend a lot of time alone, and she can see dead people, another fun element. So they're like ghouls, but she has seen them from when she was very young. Then she gets a letter from her uncle saying, I've been looking for you everywhere for years, please come home. And she does, only to find that this uncle is dead. So who wrote the letter and why is she there is what this book goes into. Again, I'm gonna put this one here. Level 4, let's do it. Next up we have The Between. This is interesting. Not quite sure, as you can tell, how to categorize this, because the most 90% of the book reads not at all like a horror story. It's like it actually goes into a very realism kind of thing where you're looking at the story of this man who's struggling with his marriage. There are issues, there are very, very, very sort of real issues that human beings go through, this relationships, race, society, all of these things. But there's just one thing that's off, which is he keeps falling asleep and waking up, and strange things are happening in his world. So like he would have had a conversation with his wife, say, and then he goes to sleep, in his wake he finds that the wife doesn't remember this conversation at all. She says, you never had this conversation with me. Or he might find himself, storming off after an argument or something and sleeps at a friend's house, but he wakes up and finds out that he's, at a house with another woman. But then he falls asleep again and wakes up again, and then this woman is not in the picture anymore. It's very confusing. So you start to wonder what is going on, but the author still manages to keep that seamless narrative of, at his core, what is bothering the protagonist and his struggle to kind of overcome those challenges. But what really got me with this book is the twist at the end. This might actually be a level 1 read. Okay, next up we have an author who I cannot call my horror collection complete until I have him in it, and that's Stephen King. And we're starting with Carrie. Carrie really surprised me. I read Carrie and I was fully expecting, because I have seen It and that kind of stuff, and a lot of people said it's not scary, but I found it very scary. So I thought, Stephen King, it's going to be weird, creepy. And yes, it is, but it's also a deeply sad story. Carrie, for those of you who don't know, haven't seen the film, is about a world in which a lot of preteen girls have telekinetic powers, so they can make things happen just with their minds and move things, whatever. And usually they don't realize they have this power, and it comes out when they're feeling extremely with high emotions. So lots of anger, frustration, sadness. Suddenly things will start crashing, falling, all of that, and not many are able to control it until we find Carrie, who kind of discovers this about herself. But at the same time, I think what's really interesting about her story is that in spite of having such power and an ability like this, she still suffers because she's not like everyone else. Her family, she comes from an abusive, difficult household. Her mother doesn't, treat her well at all, and she really struggles. So, at the end of the day, it seems to say that in spite of, you could be the most powerful person in the world, but if you don't have love, if you don't have friends, you're still gonna have a miserable existence on this earth, which is exactly what happened to Carrie. And the story kind of progresses with, her being bullied, her just being subjected to so much external pain and pressure that one day it just breaks. Really hard to read, and I think testament to Stephen King. I really didn't expect to feel so sad for this little girl and other girls like her. So I'm gonna put this probably at level 3. So we have another Stephen King. Now this is a classic, The Shining. And it was fun. It was actually spooky. One thing that I admire is when an author can give me a jump scare through writing. I don't know how they do that, but at multiple points in this book, my heart was just whoops, did not see that coming. Probably one of the spookiest books I've read so far. There is your supernatural, there's weirdness, there's distortion, there's this whole theme of, which tends to scare me a lot, which is people who suddenly becoming people you don't know. So like, especially someone close to you, your mother, father, brother, sister, best friend, who you've known for years and years and years, and suddenly turn into, a stranger as if possessed. It spooks me out. I've had recurring nightmares as a child of this happening, where people who look like my parents but aren't my parents are trying to kill me. It's a weird dream, but I used to have it at like the age of 10. I remember vividly, and it used to spook me out, and this goes right there. But I'm still gonna put this at level 2 because it is spooky. I love it. And it reads like a really entertaining thriller without too much to decode as well. So next up we have House of Hollow. This I found interesting. Once again, like in the Once and Future Witches, we have the story focusing around 3 sisters. And like The Between, there is a twist that changes the way you see the whole story. But at the same time, throughout the book, there's a good dose of just weirdness. This is a book where the trope is sort of alternate worlds and being able to travel between those worlds. So those 3 sisters, the premise is basically as young children, they're all 3 different ages, but they all disappeared at the same time. And a fairly short while later, they reappeared, but they look different. Like all their hair turned white and all their eye colors changed, but otherwise they were the same. They remembered their parents, they just didn't remember what had happened when they had disappeared. They have something's off about them in the sense that they have like almost undetectable but definitely their powers. So they can influence people around them in very subtle ways. So it's not like, magic and witches and like blasting and Avada Kedavra and all of that, but it's a little bit more, it's definitely more subtle. But I'm gonna put it in level 4 just because it doesn't have the same kind of nuance as the others or the horror factor of the ones even in level 1 and level 2. Next, we have Mexican Gothic. So this actually made it to the top of one of my favorite books of the year lists on my website. You have basically, it's set in Mexico, but the creepy family, now that we know our Gothic tropes, the big dilapidated house, the mansion, and the family living within it are English, I think, I think they're English, but white basically. They stand out from everybody else because not only because of their skin color and race, but because they isolate themselves. Like everybody knows this is a house you don't go to, things are weird up there, and things are weird. Something's wrong with that family. But this girl, Noemi, who is our protagonist, her cousin, I think, marries into the family. And one day Noemi gets a frantic note saying, "He's trying to kill me, help me." So here's where a slight twist on the Gothic trope, where instead of the woman who's marrying into the household becomes the hero, here you have the cousin. So a complete outsider entering this ecosystem and then discovering the weirdness that exists within. And there were a couple of jump scares in this. The supernatural is really supernatural and strange, and it's just thoroughly spooky, and I absolutely enjoyed it. And I think it's a very entertaining read for anyone who's like jumping back into it, wants something quick. So for that, I'm going to put Mexican Gothic at level 2 because it doesn't go deep into like, commentary and social and whatever, but it's such a fun read. So my second last one here is called Young Blood. This was given to me to review, and it's basically a collection of terrifying college tales. So these are sort of like urban legends and popular stories from different colleges, but you know what? It sounds like that really. It puts you immediately in like your friend's room in the hostel and everyone's just sharing whatever, and they tend to be like completely strange and nonsensical also, but like it goes because we're looking for anything to give us a little bit of that spookiness. You get that sense with these stories. Some of them are just like, I just find myself asking why. So I think Young Blood is going to be the first and only one on my list to go to level 5. It didn't do anything for me at all. Now we are at our last book, and this was also a gift to me, and that is Dracula. So this is 3 books, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Let me check. 1, 2, 3. Okay, 3 novels and assorted short stories. But the story that I was the most interested in is Dracula. I thought I would be bored, because look at the 5 million Dracula movies, Dracula books, like vampire books and movies that have taken over pop culture. I thought reading the original would be like, nothing in comparison because now I've seen it all. But in spite of that, this is like the origin story, the very first, like the one and only Dracula who started it all. I still, in spite of it being one of the classics, it reads very well. It's very fast paced. I didn't have any issues with getting over language and I'm looking at this from someone who maybe doesn't read classics too much and is not interested in classics, generally finds them cumbersome to read. I didn't have any of that problem with the language. It just read very easily. It moves fast. It's still refreshing and spooky. In spite of me knowing what was going to happen, I really enjoyed it. It is a good book, and I would say that for anybody like this, if you have no other classics but you want a classic in your collection, take Dracula. You'll have fun reading it. I'm going to put this also on level 1. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this book and got some inspiration if you're looking for horror or gothic reads that will interest you. And make sure that you head to my website and check out some of the writing that I have done. I write short stories and interesting articles, and also join our Instagram community if you want more book recommendations. But most importantly, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.